Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session. And today we're talking about a topic that is on everybody's, top of mind all the time, and that is builders going broke. And so we've got hopefully one of the antidotes in order to do that, and how to, stop them from actually going into insolvency in the first place. What preventative measures can we actually do to get there? So in order to do that, I've got a very special guest today, Mr. Paul Reid, CEO of Ipex Solutions, mate. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Rob.
Let me just put your name up there. That's really important that everyone knows who you are. Mate, builders going broke. It's a really, common thing that we see. And it's, especially when we've gone through the COVID side of the world, where we had a hell of a lot of them go broke at the end of that. So it's caused a huge amount of concern, not only in, the development industry, but also just mum and dads who want to build their home and that sort of thing. What are some of the common challenges that you guys see in that world? And then we'll kind of wrap into, how those things come about, and how your solution might be one of those antidotes.
Sure. Yeah, look, I think, builder insolvency is not a new concept. Like you said, it was probably exacerbated over that COVID time. And I think, the market conditions have made it harder. Costs going up, fixed price contracts, things like that. So certainly it's on everyone's mind, as you say. It is something that is very, very hard to know who's in a good spot and who's not as well. So it can be quite tough to know if you're doing the right thing and appointing the right person. And certainly you're tied to your builder for quite a while. So you do as much homework as you can, you sign your contract, and then, generally speaking, everyone hopes for the best for the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, and I guess we all want to do our due diligence on our builders and make sure that we do that correctly. And previous Sunday sessions, we've covered some of the things to actually look for in that due diligence process, but it is a point in time that due diligence actually occurs. So the day that we're actually appointing the builder, everything looks rosy,
Yes.
but the project is going to run. The builder's running many other projects at the same time. Once we can't be half pregnant. Once we're in bed with the builder, we have to take it all the way through the end. So, and that's kind of some of the challenge that actually sits there, is we might have things that are completely outside of our project that might have a daisy chain effect and pop in. So, mate, that's kind of the big lay of the land. But I guess Ipex came about because of exactly that kind of thing. So the founders of Ipex, as I understand it, are developers themselves. Give us some insights into, who Ipex are and how it came about, and how that worked.
No, spot on. So look, a number of the founding members are developers that have dealt with this problem, and obviously anyone who's developed property goes through the same thing. You've got to go and try and pick the right builder, assess the claims each month and make your payments. But then you lose all control over where that money goes. And as you say, it's probably, it would be a lot easier if it was one project at a time, but it isn't. It's 4, 5, 6 projects at varying stages of completion, with some with costs going over and some, not so much, and in control. So there's a lot that can go wrong without any need for anything on your project to go wrong. And I suppose that's where Ipex has come from. The lack of transparency and visibility in project is really, really hard to deal with. And unfortunately, if you don't have any insight into how the money is being spent, you don't know if it's reaching the right people. Often projects are 2-3 months where people haven't been paid, and ultimately no one knows anything about it. They're still releasing more payments, and it's not until the builder goes under that anyone realizes there's a problem. So that's certainly why Ipex was built, to try and open up some transparency. And obviously, if everyone's doing the right thing, it's pretty unobtrusive. No one really notices, but it is there to catch as soon as something is going off the rails.
Well, let's start with the premise that we're not saying builders are crooks or anything like that. We're saying that they can get into tricky type situations, and because they're running multiple projects at a time, go, look, I've got a little bit of surplus in this cash, in this project, and I know that this project is just short for today, and I know cash is coming in. If I just shuffle it there for a little bit, I know that the money's coming back and I can repay it. That's the intent, right? And so they're not doing anything, or typically, I should say, they're not doing anything, I guess, with any intent to harm, but sometimes that can cause a snowball effect and a daisy chain that can be detrimental to a whole bunch of things. So maybe we kind of help by understanding how a typical I guess payment process would occur in a normal traditional sense. Yes. What some of the cash flow issues and challenges are that a builder has to face, and how it's very easy to actually get into trouble in the first place. We need to understand the builder's position, yes. And if we understand the builder's position, then we can understand, I guess, how to try and help the builder to achieve the outcome that they're actually trying to achieve. Now, I'm no expert in this, but as a layperson, like got a little bit of experience.
You're doing okay?
I'm doing okay, but certainly not a builder. But as I understand it, the tradie has to, in many instances, put down a deposit for materials, so he has to cash flow that up front. The materials then are going to take some time to order and actually then arrive. In the meantime, he's trying to line up a tradie to actually do the work. I guess the supplies go onto an account. It might be a 30-day account, might be a 60-day account. And what he's trying to do is then line up the tradie to arrive at the exact same time as the materials arrive, so that the tradie can install the materials, so he can then make a claim onto, I guess, the developer in order to get the cash to pay both the tradie and also the supplies. In the meantime, the clock is ticking with regards to, I guess, the 30-day account or the 60-day account for the supplies perspective, and the tradies trying to juggle a couple of projects themselves all at the same time. Now, in most instances, that all works perfectly fine, but from time to time, little things pop up and a rain delay occurs, and now all of a sudden the tradie has 3 or 4 projects he's got to try and juggle, and he can't necessarily turn up to one on time, which then means that the materials turn up and the clock is ticking on that, and he hasn't installed the materials, so he can't charge the developer, and it just starts to snowball, right? And that's where, I guess, the potential to go, hey, I've got a little bit of cash here and a little bit of cash there, because most of the time the money is going into one builder's account to run many projects all at the same time. So that's kind of my lay view of the world. Have I kind of missed anything there, or is there a lot more to it?
No, you're welcome to keep going there if you like, but you're spot on. And I mean, if you take it all back to the beginning, and certainly, I mean, the bulk of our work, not all, but the bulk of our work is in a commercial setting where the builder starts in a cash negative position to begin with. They've got to put a significant security deposit down and tie up assets or cash. Then they've got to go out and set up site and wear those costs from day one, knowing that they're not going to get payment, their initial payment for at least, the end of month 1, make the claim. And so there's significant upfront costs before there any chance of getting payment. And as you say, it would be a lot easier if it was one project at a time. But if they're managing 5, 6, 7, 8 projects at a time, money may happen to come in for another project with the intent of paying subbies on that project or suppliers. But obviously it's there now. It's an easy decision to go off and use that. And as you say there, it's not about malice. I mean, half our job is talking to builders and understanding the position they're in. It isn't easy. Fixed price contracts, obviously, for lending, they need to lock in on prices. Obviously, prices have gone up, labour's gone up. You've talked about delays and those sorts of things, which also add to their costs. So, there's a whole range of things that can very quickly put the builder in a pretty bad position, notwithstanding the fact that they start every job cash negative to begin with. So in general, as you say, they'll manage all these projects out of the one account. Bills come in, payments go out. They're not necessarily siloing payments for specific projects. And, obviously, In theory, if everything remained at the cost that it was agreed to, it would all square off at some point down the end. But as soon as you get one project that blows out and you're behind, there's a shortfall, and ultimately it becomes a bit of Rob Peter to pay Paul. We get payment in from something else, finish that other job, but then I've transferred that deficit onto the next job. So, it's been described, it was described by a builder a couple of weeks ago down in Melbourne as a big game of pass the parcel at the moment. It doesn't have to be your project. Your project could be priced fairly, fair margins, but if a builder is carrying in losses from others, or as you say before, you do your due diligence early, but you don't know what contracts they're signing the day after, the week after, the month after, an impact from another project linked to your builder can very, very quickly come back to you. And I suppose that's the difficulty.
Yeah, and so I guess the Ipex solution was put together thinking about, I guess, that ultimate cash flow and the solution that is needed in order to enable the builder to keep doing their job and make sure that the subbies are actually getting paid. It ends up being, I guess, the subbies who get the shortfall, suppliers who get the shortfall, and then that starts to I guess backtrack onto the builder. Then the builder gets into an insolvent type situation, and then it all comes tumbling down. So I guess thinking about the solution and understanding the issues and challenges that sit in place, what is different about, I guess, the Ipex style solution in order to I guess improve that situation and limit those challenges?
Not perfect, and probably start from the beginning, going back to your due diligence point. We don't specifically have a role, and we're certainly happy for people and recommend people continue to do the due diligence checks they're doing already. Where we add an element to that is we're almost a real world test to due diligence. So you don't find too many builders coming up and saying, look, I'm in a whole heap of trouble and I owe a lot of money over there, and you're crazy to give me the job. They all look pretty solid at that due diligence phase. So the first question that Ipex asks, and I mean, to go back to the start, we essentially ring fence funds for the project at hand. So if I pay money to the builder for, number 1 Smith Street, that money can only be used to pay subbies and suppliers linked to number 1 Smith Street. It stops that money being diverted to other things. So probably worth going back to the core concept. That in itself is enough of a limiting factor that if a builder is coming in with cash flow issues, they'll tend not to want to work on an Ipex job to begin with. So even in terms of just making sure that the builder's financials are pretty solid day one, if they're open to work under Ipex where the money is going to stay linked to that project, you can be pretty confident that what they're telling you through that due diligence process and the numbers they're providing are pretty good. Doesn't solve the problem of what happens if something changes over the next 12 to 18 months, and that's where the ring fencing comes in. So ultimately, money paid under a project can only go to subbies and suppliers linked to that project. The builder can't access the funds without developer either pre or post approval. So it also encourages subbies to be paid quickly. So ultimately, as you said before, I mean, ultimately paying the subbies is the builder's responsibility, and a lot of people will leave it to them and say, oh, if they're not paying the subbies, well, okay. But if the builder goes under, it very quickly becomes the developer's problem, because you've got unpaid, unhappy subbies that don't want to show up to site anymore. They're not going to finish their work, but even probably more painful to a developer, they won't warrant the existing work, and no new subby coming in to take over is going to warrant someone else's job either. So almost the developers almost get held to ransom in a way when a builder goes under, even if they've paid the last 3 progress payments as required. If the builder hasn't passed those on, the subbies are still upset and they're not coming back to site until they get that money. So the amount of times we've had developers have to pay 2 and 3 times, we've had one very unfortunate guy that had 2 builders go under consecutively on the same project. It very quickly becomes a developer's problem. And as you say there, some of the bigger commercial developers can stomach a loss, but certainly not everyone can cope with the project going wrong and paying the same trades 2 and 3 times, and obviously the delays and holding costs that come with that. So our solution is pretty simple. The builder can only use the money to pay the people linked to the job. We independently verify them and make sure the accounts match, so they're actually paying who they think they're going to be paying. and the builder gets their entitlement only. They just can't access the subby's entitlement. So it's not about limiting the builder. It's certainly not anti-builder at all. It's just saying you've made a claim on behalf of these subbies and suppliers, plus you've got your entitlements on top. We're paying you that money, but we just want to make sure that the money that you've claimed on behalf of subbies and suppliers reaches them, and you're only using the money that you're entitled to. That's the mechanism.
Yeah, very good. Mate, you said something, I guess, right at the start of that, that you kind of went through really quick. So I'm going to loop back around and kind of pick that up so everyone picks up the subtlety on it. If, whilst we're doing due diligence on someone up front, because of the fact that you are ring fencing the funds, if a builder is in trouble, they will tend to not want to use a platform like this, which then is telling you, hey, they're probably in a situation where they might have this negative cash flow situation happening because they need that cash flow in order to get in. So it is just in its very nature reinforces, if they're willing to come on, then you can feel fairly confident that their cash flow situation is actually okay. And then manage that all the way through. So I just wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper to go, hey, that whilst the solution itself is for that point in time afterwards, it does help you very much in that due diligence process just to validate that they're I guess a viable entity.
Definitely. And let me be fair to the builders. It's very often that they're hesitant. Obviously, we're sitting there and saying, you know, you've been building for 20 years and you've done whatever you like with the money. Now I want to place practical limits on how you can spend the money. So it's not unusual to get some hesitation and some questions and say, well, how does this work? How does that work? But you're very correct in that a very hostile or negative reaction is not a good sign. And we've probably got three groups in general. You've got builders who get it straight away. We've even got our first few builders that are using it as a bid differentiator. So instead of sitting there competing just on price, they're coming in and saying, look, I know this is a big risk to you. I'm willing to give you this level of surety, but I obviously want the job. The middle is probably the norm, where people say, no, it's new. I've not done this before. How does this work? How do I get my money? Does it change all my processes, so on and so forth? But once they understand, they're fine. But we have had a small group that fought it a little too hard. Again, I'm unsure what reasons they could have to need access to subby and supplier entitlements that is commercially justifiable to any developer, but they seem to be very, very upset, and we're actually got a pretty good strike rate on those guys not lasting for too much longer. So I would say strong opposition without any intent to understand is a bad sign.
Yeah. So, and again, reiterating that, look, this is definitely not anti-builder, and it's really, how do we enable them to actually do what it is that they do in a smoother, more seamless process, and give assurances to everyone in the food chain. So I guess we've gone through the typical process. Okay. I guess your solution came about because I guess your founders, being developers, I guess were seeing that cash flow problem actually being negative and put the solution in place. Then in parallel to that, there's a whole bunch of other things happening in the industry where I guess there's a couple of big reports that went out there. So the Murray report and the Collins report and that sort of thing, that made a whole bunch of recommendations on things to actually occur, that in some instances, some states have actually rolled out legislation that sits around that. In other instances, they're thinking about that and haven't yet rolled it out, called the security of payments legislation. Those things, whilst your system has not been designed to, I guess, be built around those things, in fundamental essences, you're achieving the same things in very similar mechanisms.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think it's, as you said, there's been, those are the probably two most well-known inquiries into the issues, but there's been further inquiries previous to that. So I think it's well established that it is a big problem. And obviously, as you said before, protecting the subcontractor payments is something that has puzzled people for quite a long time. So there's definitely been rules and legislation and things put in place to really try and place controls and guidelines around timeframes for response to a claim and dispute resolution. So within securities of payment, there's a whole heap of guidelines, and then if those things aren't met, there's the ability for a subby to take recourse and try and have a, let's say, lower cost resolution to those sorts of things. Now, some governments, as you say, have gone further. So Queensland has gone further than anyone. New South Wales and WA have also put some things in place, and as you say, some of the others are thinking about it. Again, intent is positive and the same as our intent to try and make sure that funds paid to the builder arrive at the intended recipients and aren't misappropriated or shipped off to other places in the interim. But again, I suppose the difficulty that government always faces is you've got multiple stakeholders and it's hard to keep everyone happy. And what I suppose most of them have ended up with is a compromise solution. There are bits and pieces that have been included that may help builders accept. And again, in Queensland, I know that builders are no way in love with the rules up there, but in general, you end up with a compromise solution where ultimately you probably end up penalising the builders already doing the right thing. You add admin, you add cost. And in reality, I suppose where these systems and legislation, ours included, needs to function most is when the builder's distressed, when they're under immediate serious cash flow pressure. And I've got a choice to make. Do I take that money and pay that bill that's screaming at me, or do I follow the rules? And yeah, generally speaking, that choice remains. So you're still relying on people following the rules and opting to be compliant. Our system does change a little bit. We sort of take away the option not to be compliant. But at the same time, because we are certainly in my view, quite a bit more secure, we have got the potential to return, as you said before, some benefits back to the builder to help their cash flow position in other ways. Certainly the New South Wales and WA systems more around retention. So we've dealt with, and I don't think it's any real secret that builders in trouble, cash is cash, and if they've been withholding retention money on a subby, it probably just sits in their account and it's used as day-to-day cash flow anyway. So yeah, we've been certainly involved in plenty of situations where the builder is under stress and that subby retention money has been used already instead of being held for defects or to be released to the subby at a later date. So certainly WA and New South Wales have moved to protect retention money, but they're not doing anything with the other 95%. It's usually only 5% of the project. So at this stage, the bulk of the money is still paid directly to the builder into their account, which is where they're free to do as they wish.
So let's whilst we won't go into the deep dive of each individual state's legislation, let's just talk very high level at their rudimentary approach to doing that. So we touched on before a typical builder's project flow as one account for all of their projects.
Yes.
Fundamentally, the security payments legislation, as it sits in different states, tries to have a separate bank account for every single project called a trust account, and then I guess put some rules in place around what the funds are intended to be used for. Okay, and the rules, whilst they're in place, are subject to the person actually complying, because it doesn't actually put any physical restriction into that mechanism. Sorry, you go.
Oh, no. Apologies. Just to be clear, I mean, all states have security of payments rules and guidelines. Only some have rolled out trust account legislation as part of that. Obviously, they tie in quite closely together. Certainly, as you say, it's very common I would say probably standard industry practice that all projects are run out of the standard operating account, and that's where it is very, very difficult to decipher what money coming in versus money going out for. And that's where things all get mixed up in the pot. And obviously one project goes over budget. So I've paid more bills than I thought I would for them, which leaves me in a shortfall for some other poor person's project. So you're correct in that what these trust account regimes, and they're in place in other parts of the world as well, they're trying to silo funds project by project. Now, some of the trust account legislations allow the builder to have one trust account and pull funds for multiple projects in, so the siloing is not so important in some cases. But yeah, in general, the idea is to try and help decipher what money coming in is for and keep it on the path it was intended and to pay those people. But as you say, there's penalties in place. There's an audit system in place. But in general, if I'm in trouble today and I've got the full intent of paying that money back in a week or in 2 weeks, or when that payment drops or that person owes me that, and it's a choice between going under or following the rules, it's not an easy decision, I would imagine. And look, the thought of a future audit down the track where I may have done something out of the rules, again, look, in some cases, some of these rules are, a couple 100 pages long. We're certainly aware that compliance is not easy just through the complexity of what's required. So it's probably not too hard to make a claim that I didn't fully understand what I was able to do and not able to do as well. But yes, there's no practical restriction for me going in if I need that money. There's penalties if I get caught, but the intent is obviously to borrow it for a short period of time. Our system doesn't allow that option. The money sits in that account until it goes to the people that are on that list. If we take a theoretical $1 million paid in a progress payment into the account, if 800 grand of that is due to subbies and suppliers, 200 grand is the builder's prelims, margins, costs, whatever it might be. Even if I'm the builder and I decide to only pay every subbie and supplier half, so there's now 600 grand in that account, the developer's only ever going to either pre or post approve my 200K. So the other 400 sits there. So again, from a builder's point of view, the only really practical reason for not paying subbies and suppliers in full and quickly is if there's a dispute, a legitimate dispute, or there's a defect or whatever it might be, because they know on the other end, the developer can see it. So under our system, the developer can see who's been paid and when, and they can see if someone claimed on behalf of hasn't received any money. So there's going to be a conversation had very quickly, and certainly before any more money is released. And that's the key. It's not about micromanaging the builder. It's about making sure that the developer can see that everything's going smoothly, or if something doesn't look right, they can at least ask and get the explanation. But certainly that money is ring-fenced from the builder also. So it really removes the incentive to short pay or delay payment. And certainly in a lot of the projects that we manage, the builder gets paid after the subbies get paid. So the intent is there to pay very, very quickly. And certainly we're seeing the accounts, knock the table there, that's no good. The accounts paid in full within 48 hours, because that's the key to the builder getting their piece.
Yeah, so if we just kind of build that solution for everyone else so they understand how the mechanism is actually working, I guess the intent of that security payments is to silo it into an individual account, individual trust account, but there's no physical restriction. What you've done is put a layer above that trust account, so they can't go straight to the account and actually take the cash, but you put a layer in between, being the software platform, and that provides the governance that controls where the cash goes.
Exactly.
And that's the fundamental, I guess, structure, which provides visibility to, I guess, the developer. And I guess it doesn't stop the process by adding, other than adding one extra step to what the builder's already doing. But it's a relatively minor step change for them to do, rather than a rip and replace type process.
It doesn't even need to necessarily have the additional step. So again, certainly a developer can pre-approve. So again, a QS might assess a claim and say, yes, we need to pay the builder $1 million. 200 grand of that is the builder's prelims margins, what the builder is entitled to. 800 is due for subbies and suppliers. Whenever it's due, it will sit there on trust until it gets paid. But the developer can actually pre-approve the 200K then and there. So when the $1 million lands in the builder's account, they can immediately access that 200 grand. They just can't access the 800. Now, if they decide the 200 was not enough and they've had a win on a contract, they can always apply for extra. But as you say, the point is they can't wake up one day, say, oh, I've got a massive bill over here. These subbies aren't asking the money for 3 weeks. I've got a window where I can use this money where no one's expecting it, and I'm going to shuffle it off over there. They can't do it. So from a developer's point of view, it just makes sure you've got comfort that when I pay the builder, the money reaches the place it's meant to reach. And obviously I check that every month before I pay again. So it's a very, very quick check to go in. Generally speaking, the builder comes in with their next claim with a stat deck and says, I promise I've paid everyone. Our system just says, have they? Yes, they have. Play on. Or hang on, this person here, you claimed on behalf of them last month. Why haven't they received any money? Now, if they say there's a defect they're fixing or whatever it might be, you might accept it, but it's your choice and you've got control.
Yeah. So some of the, I guess, the protective mechanisms that go in there, let's talk about how does the system actually get set up in the first place. So I guess what are the inputs that go into it? How do you load, I guess, suppliers and that sort of thing in? So what's the workflow that sits behind it?
The good news for developers, lenders, project managers is there's nothing to do. So in essence, the builder will open a Macquarie facility. At the moment, we don't hold any money. Macquarie Bank holds the money. We're just an interface onto the Macquarie account. So the builder will open up a Macquarie facility and a project-specific account. They'll then log onto our system and invite all the subbies and suppliers and consultants and anyone they intend to pay. Again, going back to Queensland, they can only pay the subbies only, but in general, anyone they intend to pay for that project gets invited by the builder. On the back end, we go through, and again, this is something where due diligence doesn't generally touch any of this part. We check that the subbies are, 1, legitimate businesses, 2, that the BSB and account number, we collect that directly from the subbie or supplier, so that when the builder tries to pay someone, that has to match. So a builder can't accidentally or otherwise put someone else's BSB and account number next to the subbie's name and obviously make a payment to someone that you're not expecting. So realistically, they go through the step of inviting the subbies. Then their process doesn't really change. The subbies make a claim as they always would. The builder makes their claim. The QS assesses and approves the claim. The first point of change is instead of paying the money into the builder's everyday account, they pay it into the builder's Ipex account, and that's an important distinction from security of payments as well. You are paying the builder nominates that account as the account to be paid into, and all that happens then is the builder uses the same accounting software they always do, uploads an ABA file. All our system then does is says, everyone they're trying to pay, are they linked to this project and do the BSB and account numbers match? If that's the case, payment can go through. If it's not the case, we stop it.
I might just touch on, because you used a tiny little bit of an acronym there, an ABA file. I don't know exactly, but I think it's an automatic bank authority. So you upload all of your suppliers into a single file, and you upload that, and then your bank knows to send that in many, many, many directions. So that's an ABA file
just
for anyone
file. Yeah.
Who's not running a business and paying lots of suppliers all at once. They probably haven't come across that, but effectively, one upload, they'll pull that out of their accounting package and upload that. So, and they would typically do that anyway when paying from their normal bank account. So that process doesn't change, but your process then looks at, well, is the person that's claiming to be paid already logged into the system and has already been pre-validated. And you also do a few validation checks, I think you said, to see whether or not some of those companies have got arm's length distances between themselves and the builder and that sort of thing as well. So any insights into that?
Just that we've got probably some funny stories that we can't share. But yes, every now and again, let's say someone tries to onboard someone that may be directly related to them, or that they're the director of another entity that they're trying to onboard to pay. We do flag any cross directorships or any adverse media or anything like that. So we do all the AML KYC checks on everyone that the builder's attempting to onboard. Anything that doesn't look right, we flag with the developer. So the developer may well be aware that the builder's brother-in-law runs the demolition company and approve it. But if we see anything that doesn't look right, we will just flag it.
Yeah. Which then provides, I guess, a level of certainty that the suppliers or tradies or consultants that are actually loaded into the system are valid entities. And so any money leaving the door is actually going, I guess, as intended.
Exactly. And the main point of all of this is you've paid your money, you want to make sure it is going towards your project. Certainly a different application. And again, don't want to just turn it into an Ipex show, but ultimately, we do manage situations where a builder has run into financial difficulty mid-project. And again, they might need an extra X amount to pay for supplier deposits. Costs have escalated and they literally can't finish for the amount they've agreed to. Generally speaking, developers are open to helping, but you don't want to be covering shortfalls on 3 other people's projects. And you don't just want to be the most lovely person that is most likely to help the builder, but they don't really need $1 million for your project. They need 200 for you and 200 each for another 4. So again, it also just makes sure that even if a builder is making a request like that, you can feel comfortable that it's a genuine request and what they're asking for is required to finish your project, and you're not just kicking in to help, tie off loose ends on other things. So that's, I suppose, the main point. Generally speaking, terminating a builder or starting again and going back out to market's even more expensive than helping. But you certainly don't want to just keep throwing good money after bad either. So it is also a way for builders to prove that their requests are genuine.
Yeah, so I guess the key element is visibility, and then with visibility, you can make informed decisions.
Exactly. And on the same front there, from a builder's point of view, because there is visibility and practical control, we have developers putting money in advance. Now, it might not be a lot, it might be 1% of the contract value, it might be willing to pay certain supplier deposits. So if we go back to the start where the builders are generally, because no one knows where the money can go, everyone protects their own position. That's why everyone gets paid in arrears. I'm not paying you for that material until it's fixed to my site and it's mine. But if there's certainty over where the money can go, certainly we've got deals that get done where the builders are getting cash flow assistance from day one and are not put in that position to begin with. So that's the big picture for us. Like you said, not anti-builder. We want a fairer system that stops putting these builders under cash flow pressure in the first place. But at the end of the day, it's project by project. So, our goal is, first of all, protect the developer and the lender that are paying the bills. And obviously, big picture, we think we can make an impact longer term on how the whole industry runs.
Yeah, I guess to summarize that, to improve that initial negative cash flow position of the builder in the first place, so they're not behind the 8 ball from day one, which then means the less likelihood of them actually going into trouble if they can actually, I guess, stay on that even playing field right at the very start.
And again, as you said before, it is a contagion effect. And again, unfortunately, your project doesn't have to be in trouble in terms of the contract you've done and the price you've agreed for it to be impacted. So, certainly we can't undo if a builder's in a hell of a lot of strife. No developer's probably going to front them that much money, but certainly you can make your project quite appealing because it is competitive in some markets to even get a builder. So it can be used on that front. The other area that it can help is from a finance point of view. If a developer is battling to get finance, obviously the lenders tend to like additional security over these things as well. So there's definitely a couple of points for certainly smaller developers that may find it harder to get finance in the general market as it is.
Mate, very informative, and thank you very much for that, Paul. What passing, I guess, passing key points or key takeaways would you say to people, just to give them I guess, why consider a solution like this, and what to do irrespective of, I guess, legislative requirements, that sort of thing? What are some of the key takeaways to go, what to consider when engaging a builder?
Sure. I think you touched on the key one there. The experience tells us that I would not expect government legislation to solve the problem entirely. It's always going to be a compromise solution, keeping multiple stakeholders happy. So the reality is, I suppose, you want to take all steps possible to protect your own investment. Again, payment to subbies is very important, and the subbies have their mechanisms, but in essence, it will become your problem if it all goes wrong. So I suppose the main message is, don't wait for government to fix the problem. You've got to go out and protect your own investment as best you can. I'm assuming everyone takes out their insurances and all these sorts of things in case it rains or someone comes on site to take something. This is just another risk that is largely out of your control that you can take steps to mitigate against. Which is, again, I suppose, why we're here. It is the one thing at the moment that people can't really protect themselves against. So that's why we've put the solution out there. So yeah, in general, I mean, it's just really protecting your own interests. You're paying money for a specific purpose and to progress your project and get that finished, and obviously ultimately make a return on that. Anything you can do that stops those possibilities of that money being used elsewhere and negatively impacting you at the end of the day is probably smart to do.
Yeah, and mate, prevention is better than cure. So understanding what the problem is, proactively managing that, having visibility, making informed decisions, and I guess, if nothing else, I guess just having that visibility of the project and how it's actually tracking is a good outcome for everyone. It also gives, I guess, confidence to the builder that the money is actually coming, and a whole bunch of other things, and confidence to the subbies, the suppliers, the tradies, and that sort of thing. So, mate, overall, fantastic solution. So, thank you very much for sharing the Ipex story today, Paul.
Appreciate the chat.
No problems at all. Now, for everybody else, we have industry experts just like Paul come to our events all the way around the country. We run these in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. If you are interested in learning anything about the property development process and wanting to see real deals and hear from other industry experts about different issues and challenges that you might have on your journey, make sure that you click on the links below. We would love to see you at one of the upcoming events. So, Paul, mate, been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. And folks, we will see you all next time. Till then, bye for now.